let's talk about Brock Purdy for a second. Is Brock Purdy, well, during the game, you watched on TV. I was at the stadium. I couldn't hear Tom Brady. I love Tom Brady as an analyst. He's pretty honest.
Yeah.
And from what I understood, he kept using a particular word when describing things Brock Purdy did. Throws, decisions, average. Average throw from Brock Purdy. Mm-hmm. Is Brock Purdy average? And I asked that question last 12 games for Brock, going back to the Ravens. That's like pretty much the calendar year 2024. Last 12 games, he's 6-6 with a quarterback rating of 87, 14 touchdowns, 12 picks. Last 12 games. Yeah. Is he mid?
Well, let's talk more. So before Monday Night Football, obviously that game has to be played today. He's ranked 22nd in completion percentage at 63.9. He's tied for the fourth most interceptions in the NFL with 7. He's tied for 11 touchdowns with Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams. He's 12th in QBR and 17th in rating. Look, it's hard not to like Brock as the person because of who he is. It's an underdog story that you want to get behind and support and hope ends well. But from a number standpoint and from a film standpoint, when you're watching him, yeah, he's playing mid right now. He was good for this system. The system was good for him, but defenses have figured out how to stop this system. And now Brock Purdy's being challenged to step up and be more than just a system dude. And he's being exposed a little bit. That's the truth, man. I hate to, I like to pull my punches on Brock because I like the person. I like the kid. But from a quarterback standpoint, absolutely. He's not playing well at all. And I think we're kind of seeing who Brock Purdy is when things are going well. Look, Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy are both front runners. And I mean that from a game standpoint. When the game's going well, the run game's working, and you're up, and you're going against soft zone coverages, they can have success. But when the game's tied or they're behind and you're in known passing situations and you have to have a drop back passing game, the offense and Brock Purdy are not good. That's just the facts.
Yeah, what's tough for me with Brock is like separating him from Kyle Shanahan's problems. Like how much of Brock Purdy's malaise or whatever you want to call it is a direct result of Kyle Shanahan's system getting figured out. And here's what I want to look at. Like, well, I'll get to that in a second, but let's compare him to a couple of quarterbacks. First, we'll compare him to Jimmy G. Jimmy G won a lot with this team. Jimmy G put up good numbers with this team. Is Brock Purdy a better story than Jimmy G? Yeah, absolutely. Is Brock Purdy a harder worker than Jimmy G? No question. Is Brock Purdy a better athlete than Jimmy G? Yes. Is Brock Purdy a better passer than Jimmy G?
Mentally, yes. Physically, no. Mentally, yes.
I don't know about that. He doesn't have the arm to really challenge man-to-man coverage. He didn't have the arm to get drafted before the 7th round. Jimmy had the arm to get drafted in round 2. I think there's just more arm talent with Jimmy. And it seemed like with Jimmy, he would make a lot of boneheaded mistakes, but they wouldn't spiral on him. Like he would find a way to not care. He'd laugh it off on the sideline with that smile and then come back and do something strangely good. Whereas Brock Purdy, when it's bad, it goes bad.
Jimmy could, if the first read was open, Jimmy was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And I say that as a guy who does not like Jimmy Garoppolo. But if there's a short first look open, Jimmy was hella good. Got the ball out quick. Beautiful pass. And as far as throwing deep, Jimmy could actually throw deep physically. Mentally is where Jimmy was gun shy to pull the trigger. He is more talented from an arm standpoint. Mentally, I still like Brock over Jimmy. But from a talent physically standpoint, no, Jimmy's definitely the superior passer.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that Brock is like the next Jimmy in the sense that like Jimmy was a fraud and Jimmy's a backup now. Although he was 3-3 with the Raiders, makes you wonder. But Jimmy's a backup now, and it's sort of an example of a quarterback that Kyle and the Niners propped up. But this scheme and this system is pervasive. It's widespread across the league, and the Rams run a very similar version of it. McVay's a similar coach, and he's won a Super Bowl, but he had Jared Goff. Jared Goff was very successful early on with Sean McVay. Teams kind of caught up, and then Goff went through a couple of years where he was mid. And you thought, man, like if you're mid with Sean McVay, something's wrong with you. And they got rid of him and brought in Matthew Stafford, who's a great quarterback. But Then Goff goes to Detroit, and all of a sudden, he's not mid anymore. He's a Pro Bowl. He's playing the best of his career. And it's like, well, maybe this Ben Johnson guy's better than McVay, or maybe Jared Goff just needed a new coach. Like, before we label Brock Purdy as mid, I kind of would like to see him with a different coach, because he's done some good stuff. And I know his arm is limited, but so is Goff's to an extent. Like, Goff can't move. I feel like with a great coach, Brock Purdy's more than good enough. Maybe I'm wrong. I think he's better than average. You gave him Ben Johnson. You put him on the lines right now. I think he'd be balling.
Goff can make all the throws. Brock
True. He's got a stronger arm than Purdy. I'm not trying to equate them. That's true.
Yeah, but I agree. Like, at this moment, the way I feel right now, I'm cool on Kyle Shanahan, and I want to see Brock under a different coach. Like, I'm not done with Brock Purdy as far as like get him off my team, but that's how I feel right now about Kyle. And I've never said that before until yesterday, and we're going to talk about that later. But with Brock, I do want to see him with another coach and see what he looks like. And Ben Johnson is the hottest ticket right now as far as coaches are concerned. I would love to see Brock with a good offensive play caller. It's crazy to say that, because that's what Kyle's known for. He's called the genius, but he's just not. There's no creativity from him. Ben Johnson is. If Kyle's a genius, what's Andy Reid? What's Ben Johnson? Because they're much more successful offensively than Kyle has been. So to me, I'm lower on Kyle than I am on Brock Purdy. Now, Brock Purdy, if you look at him, we all wanted to ask the question, Grant. Like, the question was coming into the season before we pay him, what does he look like if you take some of these weapons away? Well, we're seeing it. He's trending 22 touchdowns and 17 interceptions on the season. That doesn't include his fumbles. He's pretty much 1-to-1 turnover to touchdown ratio, and that's not good.
And he's trending for like 7 or 8 wins.
It's not good. It's not good, man. And so to ask the question is he mid? He's playing like it right now. There's no other way to put it. He is.
He is. And again, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, like, man, this is more of a function of Kyle. Like, anytime Kyle goes up against a certain, like, a good defense, he falls apart. But anytime Brock Purdy goes up against a good defense, he's terrible. Like, he's good against bad teams, but when he goes up against Kansas City, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Minnesota, I mean, it's all bad. It's a disaster. That's scary. They're 0-5 when he throws 2 picks in a game, man. If he was really good, he'd be able to, like, win some of those games. Like, Patrick Mahomes could throw 2 picks in a game and win. I'm sure he does it all the time. But Purdy can't. What's that about?
Well, what it's about really is, like, you could throw out stats, and you and I are both, neither one of us are big on, like, stats. We're not like stats are everything, right? But here's what matters: the difference between Patrick Mahomes and a Brock Purdy is, in those key moments, Patrick Mahomes steps up and he has it. Brock Purdy has yet to show us that he's that guy. In the Super Bowl, he didn't lose the Super Bowl, but he had opportunities to win the Super Bowl, and he didn't take advantage of those opportunities. So Brock Purdy has yet to show us that he has it. And until we see that, he's never going to be on that level. So despite what statistics people want to throw out to justify and say he's playing better than Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes is finding ways to win games. Brock Purdy is not.
I just think it was interesting that it was just last week Purdy beat Seattle in Seattle, and people were talking about he was the top graded quarterback in PFF, and he's better than Patrick Mahomes, and he's worth $60 million a year. Like, I don't think people feel that way anymore. I don't think we have to say it. I mean, this guy cost himself a lot of money yesterday.
Yeah, and season's still relatively young. Maybe he can come back, but what he's got to do is, when he's facing teams that disguise their coverages and disguise their blitz, he's got to show that he can win those games. And so far, when he faces defenses like that mix it up, disguise their blitz, mix up their coverages, go to man, like, he's got to show that he can beat those teams, and he hasn't shown that yet. The closest thing he's done beating the Seahawks, Mike McDonald, with a ton of missing players. It's not like Mike McDonald had the Ravens defense to throw at Brock Purdy. We saw what Mike McDonald did with the Ravens players. The Seahawks are not a good team, and that's what's going to happen against this Cowboys team this coming week. I don't know if that's on the agenda, but I expect the 49ers to beat the Cowboys, and I expect Brock Purdy's going to have a good game against the Cowboys, and all the hype's going to come back, and then they're going to go play a team with a good defense again, and the exposure is gonna come again, and that's my worry with Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan.